test cock number 4. That's pretty good height, right? Why is the flow? So we don't dump the relief. Can't dump the relief before. Open 1. Close 1. Open 2 slowly.
So if you were to open it quick, would it dump the relief?
It could dump the relief, and if you dump the relief too quick, because there's just a small tube in here holding it back, that's a fail. That's a critical.
Yeah, can you?
Okay, 3's after it, doesn't matter.
Can you dump the relief so we can see an example of it?
Would that
In
ruin?
the Cabraco room. I'll do it.
I was gonna fail you.
Okay, and close 4. Wipe it down because I don't want any dripping water on it. Showing the relief stopping. Okay. Next thing, I gotta hook up my equipment. All the valves closed.
Can you upload that to the WhatsApp group after?
You did it last.
Oh yeah, I tried.
File too big?
It-
Too big, yeah, and I just lowered the quality.
Remember, as you guys put these gauges away, there's a few gauges yesterday that I was going around opening the valves. When you leave, open the valves before you put it away.
Fail.
I side the tube. Flow direction, going that way, yes. Hook that up to 3. Make sure they're nice and snug so they're not dripping. And I want to open 3 first. Once again, I'm establishing flow so I do not dump the RP.
3 both side.
Low side. Just let that air get out.
Oh, you don't open both high and low before you start bleeding? You do them
No.
individually?
Because we'll dump the RP.
Yeah.
I'm establishing flow. If I don't establish flow, the relief could dump and that's a critical. Okay? Okay. That's good. Leave it running. Open up high side. Slowly. Gauge kick in. Open high side bleed. Slowly. Take a few minutes, right? This really calms your nerves down when you do it this way. Each assembly is about 15 minutes. Okay, that's good. Close high side slow, then close low side. That stops the.
So then how does that not dump the RP? Because now you've got both closed and no flow.
Because
It
it's still in
equalizes the
it's a
pressure.
low zone.
Oh, okay.
So I haven't put the water through here yet,
Oh, okay, okay.
okay?
So you have a continuous flow at the moment. I don't quite understand how dumping the RP at this moment would be like a critical fail, seeing as it would just,
If you dump it before you test it, it's a critical.
okay.
Because once we test it, it's fine. If I dump it before, I don't have an established low zone. And that's why it would dump. So I've caused an error. Okay. Close shut-off valve 2. So if you notice, my hand is here on this one. That prevents me from closing this one. It's really hard for me. So the Cabraco room's opposite, the Wilkins room's opposite. Okay? That is closed. And now I'm going to make sure the gauge is not dropping. And I'm going to give it 10 seconds. Okay, my gauge is not moving. I've given it sufficient time. And my apparent is 8.4. Okay, so on my sheet, I'd go over and write 8.4. That is not the first test. I'm just setting up the equipment. I've only isolated So the first test now is the relief opening. I need water. Here's my water source. So I'm opening the valve, high side valve, one complete turn. And open up the high side valve then, set the gauge up somewhere neat for me, put my hand below, and open the low side, nice and slow. You can see how slow that's kind of going.
If you were
Okay.
to just crank it, it would give you an inaccurate reading.
It will drop below the reading that you have, and you can take an inaccurate reading. Okay, so I've got 3.6 right now. Now, at this stage, I can close it. This is what I want you guys to watch here. Here's the 3.6 says it's dripping. If I closed it, what did the gauge do?
Go up.
Goes up.
It went up. So we gotta be very careful I don't take that reading with the gauge open. Close, have it running, take the reading, then close it because it will bounce back up again. Okay? Okay, so now my relief is ready. The next test I have is check valve 2. Check valve 2 means I need a bypass hose. The zone of low pressure is still under test.
What was that reading there?
3.6.
Yeah,
And
3.6.
that's your differential for the relief valve.
That's differential relief opening. Okay? Flush the line out. Watch the RP this time, because it's still under higher pressure from the previous test. All I'm doing is flushing this line. When I close it, it spits a bit. That is not a critical, because I've tested the RP.
Yeah, okay.
So do not freak out at that point. You're totally fine. I'm just getting the hose ready. Hook up to test cock 4. Immediately open test cock 4. That is another critical. If I don't open that test cock, I am not back pressuring it. Okay, so my gauge is ready, but my equipment is not ready. My assembly is still under test. So to get rid of the pressure in the low zone, I open low side bleed. A few seconds to get that pressure out of there. Close low side bleed. And once again, make sure the gauge is not moving. Opening bypass valve. If you don't open the bypass valve, that is a critical. So one complete turn on that guy, and wait.
When
You have a slight bit of discompression, so my gauge has dropped down, okay? So if you notice, it's about 8.4 right now, okay? So once again, 10-second count, gauge wasn't moving, and I just give it the 10-second count. My gauge is holding steady. I will take check valve 2 as closed tight in reverse pressure, okay? All right, the next test that we gotta do is getting my static. I have discompression happening right now. That's what this test did. It's got discompression pushing on that disc. I do not close this. I do not close bypass valve. I just want to get rid of the discompression that is in the low zone. So to get rid of the discompression in the low zone, I bleed low. I call it a reset. Okay, reset your assembly. Bleed low for a few seconds. Close it. And now we're looking for it to be in static condition. So static condition means this is still under back pressure, so I know it's not coming this way. And if my gauge is not dropping, that means check 1 is holding tight. And give it a second here, 10 seconds. And I'll call that 8.4. Okay, given sufficient time, there's my reading. Close 2. Close 3. Close 4. Move gauges. Just like we talked about yesterday, whichever way you want to use. The gauge you can use, the bleed valve on top of the end where the gauge is going to go. or strictly just a gauge. Your choice, either three are fine. Test cock number one. And it's kind of fluctuating between 70 and 72. The bottom end is 70, so 70 psi line pressure. Okay, between the static and the relief opening, what was the static line? 8.4?
4,
Relief was 3.6.
Yep.
What's the difference?
4.8.
4.8. Buffer's 4.8. I have a sufficient air gap between here and the flood level rim, minimum 1 inch or 2 times pipe diameter, and I have more than that. So do your last checks on everything, make sure all your test cocks are closed, wipe everything down because we don't want any drips left over because it won't be a year before we come back. And do I have permission to put the assembly back into service? Yes, you do. Okay. Put the assembly back into service. Go over, finish checking off